We go.
There we
Formally,
go.
good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first of two conversations with our curator sessions for the month of November. My name is Melissa Ziobro, and I am the Director of Curatorial Affairs for the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music here at Monmouth University in beautiful West Long Branch, New Jersey. Tonight, we are chatting with Alan Light. Alan is a journalist who's been a rock critic for Rolling Stone and the editor in chief for Vibe, Spin, and Tracks, as well as a consultant for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, among many, many other things. But we only have an hour, so we are here tonight to discuss Alan's new book, Don't Stop. Why We Still Love Fleetwood Mac's Rumours. It literally just came out days ago, so we're especially lucky Alan is joining us here tonight. But before we dive into chatting with Alan, just a few housekeeping details. Apologies to our regulars who hear this every month after month, but we do always have new people. And, I love that it's my job to spread the word about the good work that we do at the archives. So if you're not familiar with us, again, we are at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey, just a mile from the beach and just a little bit up the road from famed Asbury Park. Our mission is twofold. We preserve the legacy of Bruce Springsteen. We are his official repository, but we also celebrate the history of American music in all its diversity of artists and genres with our exhibits, programming, and publications. As a public historian, I really believe that music is one of the most accessible ways that we can engage with the past. So, we at the Archives are in the midst of building a brand new 30,000 square foot facility, which is scheduled to open on the campus of Monmouth University around the spring of 2026. It's new construction, right? So, I always like to give us a little wiggle room there. It will feature a roughly 250 seat theater, exhibits, the archive for research, a gift shop, and so much more. You can see more about our work on our social media and at springsteenarchives.org. You can also donate on our website if you are so inclined, because we are, after all, a 501c3. I will put the Linktree link in the chat so you can get connected with us if you aren't already. So thank you for letting me have 2 minutes to introduce us to you a bit. As I said, we've always got some new names on our registration list. So all right, back to tonight's program. Conversations with Our Curator is this free monthly series we've been doing for over a year now, almost 2 years now, featuring researchers and writers who are exploring new perspectives in American music history. Sometimes we have Bruce books, yes, but again, we are the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music. And so we do explore other parts of our great music history. After some initial questions from me, we will open the floor to audience Q&A. And as I said, we keep these to no more than an hour. I have posted the books through the end of 2025, so you can see that list for the end of the year on our website. Again, we've got 2 sessions this month. We're here tonight, and then on November 19th, we'll have Monmouth University professor and musician Jay Sweet discussing his book on Ray Brown, famed jazz bassist who worked with the likes of Dizzy Gillespie. So we really look forward to that as well. Get a little two for the price of one this month. All right, so Alan, give us just a little overview of yourself in addition to what I just shared, a brief biographical sketch, if you
All
will.
right. Well, first, thank you for having me. And Melissa, it's good to see you so soon again after being with you in Calgary, of all places,
Of all
where,
places, we were at the National Music Center in Canada.
yeah, for a conference just a few weeks ago. Um, and very briefly, I grew up around a newspaper. My mother was a newspaper writer and a dance critic, former dancer. And so the idea of going to see performance and trying to figure out what you saw trying to figure out how to communicate that to people, help them understand, help them give them ways to think about what, this whatever art it may be, um, was dinner conversation for me growing up, and something that I really wanted to be close to, be near for whatever reason. As all of us would probably say, music was the thing that I, from a very young age, was obsessed with and wanted to figure out how to make part of my life. And this was the direction that ensued. I interned at Rolling Stone between my junior and senior year in college, came back and worked there, initially in the research department, and worked my way up to be a senior writer there. Left Rolling Stone to go work on the launch of Vibe magazine when Time Inc. and Quincy Jones were starting that publication in 1993. Ran Vibe for several years. We grew so big, so much, and so rapidly that we ended up acquiring Spin magazine. I worked with both for a little bit, and then ended up taking over and working as the editor-in-chief at Spin for a number of years. Left there to go launch my own magazine, as Melissa mentioned, a magazine called Tracks that I published for a couple of years. Grew from zero, had to raise the money, had to write the business plans with my partner, who was our publisher. We got off and running and put out a magazine I was very proud of, but eventually our primary investor decided not to continue with us, and we had to shut that down. Many lessons learned from that I an experience that I look back on fondly, even if it didn't end up working as well or as long as we had hoped. And this was really the time where magazines and media were going through such a dramatic transformation. Easy to understand why somebody didn't necessarily want to continue to be putting money towards a medium that was rapidly disintegrating and declining in the world. And so I had to start shape-shifting away from the magazine world. I started writing books. This new book is my 7th or 8th book that I have written. Different things. I wrote a book about the song Hallelujah and its journey through the world. That was adapted into a documentary that did very well a few years back. I wrote a book about Purple Rain and Prince. I worked a lot with Prince back in the 90s. And so that was a book that I really wanted to write. I co-wrote Greg Allman's memoir and Peter Frampton's memoir. I worked with them on their books. I wrote biographies of Johnny Cash and Nina Simone and the Beastie Boys and very different sorts of projects. And now this book about Rumours is the latest. Also in there, I spent about 7 years as a host on Sirius XM. We launched a channel that was a music talk channel called Volume. Maybe some of you were there for that ride with us. Like a sports channel, politics channel, live call-in radio channel, all talking about music stuff. It was super fun. And we had a great run, but eventually Sirius did a $100 million deal with Conan O'Brien and had to give him a spot on the dial. And they took our channel 106 and handed it over to him. And that was the end of that.
If you're going to lose your channel, I guess losing it to Conan O'Brien.
You lose to a big superstar, multi-million, mega million-dollar deal. What can you say? And then have just worked on a lot of different other projects over the years, whether it is stuff with, as Melissa said, stuff with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I worked actually a lot with the Bruce team on a documentary that HBO did, a 2-part documentary about Elvis a few years back that Tom Zimney directed, and Landau was the executive producer, and I was the writer on that project. Did that. Worked on some other films. I won an Emmy Award that's over there on the shelf behind me over there for a documentary about Janet Jackson and the halftime show wardrobe malfunction incident and its sort of cultural impact. And just continue to try to look for interesting ways to keep telling these stories, to keep working with these artists, to keep working on this history. To take it back to where Melissa started, I was an American Studies major when I was in college. And so working with in the world of cultural history, and I had a concentration in American popular music within the American Studies major. So looking for ways to connect the country's history and our culture's history and how music impacts, reflects, moves that forward. That's all the stuff that I am really interested in, and continue to look for opportunities to do that kind of work wherever they may present themselves.
So, first of all, I need to get you to campus for like a careers panel because that whole path and the diversity of your experiences is very interesting, but that's a
Yeah, well,
an ask for another day.
the diversity, a lot of it is out of necessity. I mean, working at the nexus of the music business and the media and magazine business, these are two things that within my career have gone through very radical, dramatic transformation. So the journalism is always going to be my favorite thing, and I still write for the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and Esquire and Mojo and different publications when I can, but there is just not enough out there for that to continue to be a way to make a living. And so trying to find other ways and other outlets, it became clear was going to be essential if I was going to keep doing this kind of work. So being open to a range of things, that diversity was, it's been great. It's always exciting to find other media, other outlets, other ways to do this stuff, but also was you know something that was forced into if I was going to keep moving forward.
Mm. And not only have you done a lot of different types of work, the subject matter has changed, right? So
Yeah.
genres, time periods. Tell us how you came to be writing this particular book, Why Fleetwood Mac's Rumors.
So really what I noticed when my son was in high school a few years back was that there was one classic rock album, there was one older album that all of his friends seemed to know about and seemed to have a relationship to, and that was Rumours. That they really didn't have that same awareness or same sense of relevance for Hotel California or Dark Side of the Moon or any of the other sort of big mega, you know, greatest generation rock albums. But Rumours, for whatever reason, seemed to connect with them like a current day pop record, and that it held this very unique place for younger listeners, for Gen Z listeners. And I was trying to figure out why that was and trying to get a sense of like how did they find it? Why does this connect to them and why do they relate to it in a way that seems so different from anything else that you would group among its contemporaries and its peers? And I started to think about that. And then I started to think about all of the different ways that the material from Rumours has continued to reappear in the culture, whether it was the TikTok, the guy on the skateboard with the cranberry juice, that was one of the formative TikTok clips that really helped establish the entire platform back in 2020, in this country and in the world, or whether it was the episode of Glee that was all songs from Rumours, the first time that they did an episode that was built around one album, or Daisy Jones and the Six, first as the book, then as the TV series, or Guardians of the Galaxy using The Chain as a song that was a central part of the film. And as I started to dig into the data, it was crazy to see that this, which was kind of initially just this observed sort of hunch, was true in ways that I couldn't even have imagined. That, 2 years ago, Rumours was the most streamed album of the 20th century on Spotify by far, more than any Beatles album, more than Nirvana's Nevermind, more than Appetite for Destruction, more than anything that you might think of. It was way ahead of all of those things. Last year, 2024, Rumours was Billboard, when they did their year-end lists, Rumours was the biggest selling rock album of the year, old or new, of anything. As we sit here and speak, Rumours is a top 20 album on the album charts right now. It's number 19 on the charts. There isn't another catalog album, for 50 spots behind that. Then there's some greatest hits records, and like that's it. So it clearly is true that there is a popularity that feels unprecedented around this album that's almost 50 years old and selling and streaming like a pop record. So I set out with this book not so much to do the making of story, which we all kind of know, and there's the classic albums episode on VH1, and there are books that have been done, and we sort of know that stuff. But what I really wanted to look at was, how does this record live in the world today? How does it work? How does it resonate? What is this endless popularity, endless legacy? And so I went out and spoke to about 30 some post millennials about their relationship to the album, about how they found it, what they think about it, how they use it in their lives, and really tried to get at a story of, how does a phenomenon like this continue and extend and and exist as such a present thing, even as even as old and even as much of a past and a history as it has, what it means right now. That was what I wanted to look at.
That's so interesting to me that it starts out as this hypothesis, right? That you're observing your own son and his
Yeah.
friend group, and then you're able to go dig into the data. And I'm always telling my students, you can have a hypothesis, but be prepared to change it if you need to, if the data doesn't support it. But here the data supported it. And you're like, wow, there really is something here.
Just supported it in ways I could never have imagined. That, not only, okay, yes, it is a thing, but it's really a thing so far above and beyond any of what you would think of as its, again, its competition or its peers, that it's in its own category.
And for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, but is going to order it the second you get off this Zoom, I want to point out, as Helen noted, it's not just a making of. That's what I think really sets this book apart and made it so interesting to me, is the interviews you took the time to conduct with the young fans in particular. What are some of the most surprising things you learned from these young fans about why the album resonates with
Yeah.
them?
I mean, obviously there's lots of different reasons and lots of different sort of entry points, right, for this album for these younger subsequent generations. And some of them are logical enough. I think that the gender composition of the band is really important. I think the fact that there are, you know, not only is it not only that there are women in the band, I mean, this is a simple sentence, but easily overlooked. It is the biggest selling album in American history with majority female voices on it. It's the seventh biggest selling record of all time, but that's behind Thriller and Eagles' Greatest Hits and Hotel California and Back in Black and like all dudes. Um, and it's not even just sort of a band with a chick singer, construct. It's these two women, both singers, but also both songwriters, both, equal front people within this band. Um, and I think for a generation that's obviously much more gender conscious, much more multicultural aware, the idea of a rock band as like four white guys with long hair and guitars, that's a very like that's their parents' band, right? That is an old-fashioned construct to them that I think they have a hard time connecting with. But this, in a world where the biggest pop stars are all women, it's Taylor and Beyonce and Billie and Sabrina, and like now it is women who are really driving where pop music is going. And so I think being able to look to this group with these women, and these two women not in competition with each other, but collaborating, cooperating, each respecting what the other one is doing, not being pitted against each other. That's I think a big part of it. The sound obviously is a big part of it. There's something that is so distinctive about what the Rumours sound is, and we can talk about that. But I think the most surprising to me is, I think if you're, my age and you grew up in real time with Rumours, you really define the album through the anger, the tension, the soap opera, Stevie versus Lindsey, all of the chaos in the studio, the backstory, and it's the greatest breakup album of all time. Anytime there's a poll of greatest breakup album of all time, Rumours pins the #1 spot. But when you talk to people who grew up, who were born 20 years after the album came out, they have a very different emotional relationship to this record because they know the story went on. Like there's all this chaos and there's all this stuff that happened and there were all these breakups and everything that's happening around Rumours, but the band continued. They made more albums. They had more hits. They were able to keep touring. They were able to keep going, whatever the struggles and the tensions and the drama was. It wasn't the end of the story. And I heard from so many of these kids, they don't think of it as a breakup album. They don't think of it as an angry album. They would say, this is an album I listen to in the morning when I'm getting ready for school or before I go out with my friends. And they hear, I think, the real emotional spectrum of the album. They hear You Make Love and Fun on there just as much as they hear Go Your Own Way, right? They hear Songbird and they hear The Chain. And it represents sort of a beginning, middle, and end, and with The Chain, that there's never an end to relationships. And I never would have thought they talked about, I don't want to say that, they found relationship goals in Rumours. That's maybe a little overstatement, but they certainly found life lessons. And for being young people dealing with these feelings, these emotions, these experiences for the first time, that they could see, oh, just because you break up with somebody, it's not the end of the world. It's not even necessarily the end of your connection to that person or work that you were doing together or whatever it is. These guys kept going through even for everything that was going. They knew that the music was more important, the work they were doing. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to let this derail that. And I think hearing all of that was the most surprising thing to me, that it really represented all of these different feelings and emotions and not just the way that we approach it as this crazy, horrible, mess of an experience.
I think a lot of people, if they were to dissect the album, they would talk about these two things, right? Either it is a breakup album or the technical craftsmanship of the album, which, as you noted, it has this
Yep.
very unique sound. Talk to us a little bit about the sound and why the sound
Well,
holds up, even against music that is being made today in very, very different ways.
yeah, I think a couple of things that people said that stood out. I spoke to this songwriter named Julian Bonetta, who wrote a bunch of the One Direction songs, but he also wrote Espresso for Sabrina Carpenter and that Big Teddy Swims song last year. He's like right now, a super A-list pop songwriter. And he was saying, Rumours, it's never too much of any one thing,
Mm.
right? It's a rock record, but it's not like too hard a rock record. It isn't like there's guitar solos. You get that sense from Lindsey of his virtuosity, but it's not like 5-minute Pink Floyd guitar solos. It's kind of yacht rocky, but it's not too smoothed out where it's just sort of bland. And it's got some country and folk feel to it, but it's got this sort of really amazing driving rhythm section to it. And it manages to walk this balance and this tightrope where it touches on all of these different things, but never in a way that becomes alienating to anybody because it becomes too much of any one sound. Also, the fact that it is 3 singers, 3 songwriters, 3 different perspectives, points of view, voices, sounds, 3 people at different places, even within the relationship, like where they are in terms of what they're singing. I think for especially younger people who really didn't grow up listening to albums so much,
Mm.
Rumours almost plays like a playlist. It's
Mm.
constantly shifting. It's constantly moving between these different sounds and styles and voices and points of view. And I think that makes it something that younger listeners can key into in a very different way than like one guy singing at them for 45 minutes.
Mm.
Um, And then the last thing is, I talked to this woman named Emily Lazar, who's a Grammy-winning mastering engineer. Amazing. She does the Foo Fighters records and Beck records, and she did the Atmos mixes for the Beatles box sets and the Stones box sets. And, she's like top of that world. And she said, every band that comes to me, I ask them, what do you want your record to sound like? And she said, most of them say, oh, well, we want it to sound like Rumours. And she's like, okay, but what does that mean? Like when you say that, what are you talking about? And they say, well, we want it to be like warm and live and sort of woody and organic and, have this real, this close feel. She's like, okay, I get what you're talking about, but Rumours is actually none of those things. Like there's nothing. The only thing on Rumours that's the band playing live is the instrumental section on the chain. Every other second of that album is overdubbed, constructed, so much so that they almost destroyed the physical tapes that the album was being recorded on. They were peeling away from the backing. They almost lost the entire record because they were doing so many overdubs and session after session after session. She's like, so it's not live and organic at all. And it's not really warm sounding. Actually, if you listen to it, it's very bright sounding, especially all the Lindsey stuff is, this almost sort of brittle feeling to it. So we bring this association of the aesthetic and the look and the clothes and the 70s and the album cover and the colors, and we attach all of these feelings to it and think like, oh, that's what it sounds like, when actually that's not what it sounds like at all. I talked to Mark Ronson, the producer and DJ, and he's like, you go back and listen to this, you think it's like a Steely Dan record or something where everything is super perfect, this sort of real studio flawless thing. It's like if you listen to it, there's raggedy stuff all over that record. There's a lot of like Mick Fleetwood just banging the hell out of the drums, and this sort of barrel house blues thing that Christine McVie will do on piano, stuff that's a little distorted, stuff that's a little. It's like, and that's where the life of it comes from. It's not so polished that it doesn't have a feel to it, but we don't really think about it that way. We think about it as this other kind of studio creation that doesn't have that roughness that actually really contributes to what we respond to.
You made a comment that I was just jotting down notes here. You said there's so many different things going on across the album. It's not just one guy singing at you for 45 minutes. And I often talk to my students about their short attention spans, right? If I show a 5-minute video clip in class, it's too long, right? Because they are used to this
Right.
very quick, snappy content. Do you think that in some ways plays into their embrace of the album because there's a lot going on, so it captures their attention?
I do think so, but I do think it's interesting that they respond to it as an album. They have at least an awareness of it as an album. Though it's funny, there was one girl who said, I didn't really listen to it through as an album until quite recently, but I realized I have all these playlists for different moods and different things. And I have a running playlist and I have a late night playlist. And pretty much every song on the album is somewhere on one of my playlists, but I hadn't really put them together and listened to the album until recently. But I think that gives a sense of this range of all of these different things that are going on there, that it slots in all of these different ways in their lives. And then the other thing is, if for new music, the things that kids listen to as albums and not just as I like this song, or the ones that they invest in, the Taylor Swift album, the Beyonce album, the Sabrina Carpenter album, a lot of that really is because there's a narrative and a backstory to those albums, right? That you're listening through for, oh, I know what this is really about, and these are the themes, and she's really singing about this person, and what is this about? And you're trying to get inside it and figure out what's really going on, and all the, you're dialed in, or you're as much invested in the story as in the songs. And Rumours is the blueprint for that. I mean, Rumours is the first time that people listened with that sense of, oh, she's singing about him and then he's singing back to her with this.
That's
Before,
interesting. Do the kids you spoke with know the lore?
wide range across the board. There are some who are very like, we're theater kids, we're super into drama, we're all about the lore and the soap opera, and we know all that stuff. But there was one girl I spoke to, and I asked, like, when did you find out about the soap opera and all the backstory and everything that was going on, in relation to the music? And she said, right now, when you're asking me, like, I don't know anything about any of that. That has nothing to do with how I've listened to these songs or why I've listened to these songs. So, and I was a little surprised by that. Again, you just sort of assume everybody who's in is in for the drama and the chaos and all the intra band breakups and crazy drug intake and everything that's going on around the story. And most of them to some degree are. And there are things that have really propelled that. I mean, right now, probably the performance of Silver Springs when they did the reunion show, that the dance that came out as the dance in 1998. That performance of Silver Springs, where at the end Stevie picks up the microphone and goes over and sings right at Lindsey, staring daggers through him. That 20 seconds or whatever is a massive thing on TikTok. That's like, this is the most badass thing that anybody's ever done on a stage. So certainly they a lot of them got there or keyed into it or even discovered it through these parts of the story. But others not so much. And some of the others even expressed like some annoyance and saying it's kind of a drag that the story takes up all the oxygen in the room. Like, I just want to be able to listen to the songs and I don't have to, have it all attached to all of this other stuff. Like, that's much less interesting to me. So that was all across the board.
So you have such a deep, deep background in music history and music criticism. Um, we've discussed that part of the ongoing popularity of the album is its presence on social media, right? So to a degree, is it a fluke that this album is so popular just because it happened to be the one that caught on and now keeps getting replayed and repurposed and reshared and readapted? Or is it really the merits of the album that perpetuate its popularity?
I mean, I can't say it's a fluke when it's continued to recur over and over and over again. Whether it was, Don't Stop as the Bill Clinton campaign theme and that being a hit and them coming back together for that and that getting the attention, that leading to then the reunion, that dance performance, and that was a huge hit, one of the biggest live albums of all time. And again, then it's Glee, and then it's Daisy Jones, and then it's in film, and then it's TikTok, and then it's the other TikTok, and then it's it's fluky if it's once. It's not fluky if every couple of years there's some other example of some other way that it captures the imagination. And a lot of those aren't, they're not making a whole episode of Glee out of Rumours songs just to try it out or just to do the band a favor. I mean, they're doing it because they believe that's gonna, it's gonna react. People are gonna, that Glee fans are gonna respond to those songs. And it did, and it shot the album back up on, into the top 20 on the chart. I think it got it up to number 3 in Australia the week after the Glee episode aired. So clearly there's something that's bigger than just, that sort of crazy TikTok inexplicable virality that happens. There's no way to explain why the dude on the skateboard with the cranberry juice became like, you can't go back and recreate why did everybody love that. Like, we'll never know. But it's part of this continuum that I think demonstrates, again, this sort of sense of continuing ongoing relevance, ongoing connection to this album that at a certain point just becomes undeniable.
You noted that you can recall, when the album came out.
Yeah.
So
One of
in
the first albums I bought, yes, in my life.
in writing the book, did your own relationship to the album change in any ways, or did you perhaps hear new things that you hadn't heard before, particularly as you're approaching it through this lens of these young
Yeah.
kids?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think with any great album, you're constantly hearing new things or reacting to. I mean, I think any of us would say with our favorite albums that we listen to over and over again, there's always more things that we discover or that we didn't hear, and we respond differently to, to a song now than we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Um, but I think hearing these, younger people talk about these songs, their relationship to the songs, did make me hear and think different things. A number of them singled out the song "Never Going Back Again" as a favorite, which is I just wouldn't like. That's kind of a tiny little song, a handful of words, just Lindsey and an acoustic guitar, and I just wouldn't think of that as like a big moment on the record. Obviously, it isn't one of the hits. It isn't one of the, big signature moments,
Yeah.
but it was one that a number of them pointed to as a song that was important to them.
Yeah.
And so it made me go back and reconsider something like that. What is it about that lit them up in that way, or again, that they've connected with so strongly. Um, and the ways that the songs interconnect, again, I think opening up that sense of this really is the full story of, not a single relationship, but of the experience of going through a relationship from the beginning, from "You Make Love and Fun," through something like "Songbird," that's really appreciating love that maybe isn't even romantic love, but sort of friendship and love and feeling that sort of closeness with people, through the struggle of what dreams is, through the anger and the breakup, and then ultimately with the chain, this sense of, you're never totally disconnected from somebody that you were close to, that this is something that you take with you and is part of what is part of you for the rest of your life. I don't, we hear all of those things. I don't know that I had as explicitly sort of connected the dots through all of the different things that are going on through this album until I was hearing all of these listeners talk about these different moments and how those go together, fit together for them.
Alan, have you ever had the opportunity to talk to anyone from the band about the album's unique,
I
lasting?
have. I have in the past. They didn't want to talk to me for the book.
Okay.
Stevie said, "When I talk about Rumours, it's going to be for my book." I'm like, "Well, honey,
Good point.
you've been talking about your book for 40 years. So how about just write the book? We would all love to read
Maybe
it."
she needs you to help her write the book. You
and and I don't even want your war stories. I'm not even doing the, like, again, the studio. Like, I would just have loved to get her perspective on who she sees in her audience
Yeah.
today. It was not essential for the way that I was treating this book. I didn't need to get them, but
Yeah.
it would have been nice. But I have spoken to them previously. I did a Stevie and Lindsey interview around one of the anniversaries. I don't know, 25 or 30 or somewhere in there, where there was one of the reissues, and spoke to them a lot about the legacy of the album and what they see as what, even at that point, why people were still responding it to the degree that they were. So I did have some stuff to draw from. Again, it's not really the focus of what this project was, but at least get some sense of their voice and their take. Yeah.
Yeah. Are they like puzzled by it, or is your take that they're like, of course, it's an amazing album?
I think both of those things. I mean,
Okay.
I think they see it and recognize it. I think at a certain point, particularly for the artist, they're, as you know, often the last ones to be able to explain why people respond. As you know, most artists are like, "I thought this song was going to be the one
Yep.
everybody loved, and then it turns out this is the one everybody loves, and I don't really know, I don't really get it." So I think that the scale of it is something that they obviously can't fully explain, but clearly they are aware of, and you know, keeping some track of what this phenomenon that after a certain number of years has nothing to do with them. But the parallels are interesting. When I did my Hallelujah book, right? It's different. Hallelujah was a song that nobody knew. And then many years later is a song that everybody in the world knows. And I wanted to really look at how, what, like the sort of whodunit part of how did we get from there to there. And that was one where for Leonard Cohen, that this becomes a phenomenon 20 years after he recorded it. There was really this sense of this really has nothing to do with me. Like this is just this free floating thing that people have found. Now, Rumours, it's one of the biggest selling albums of all time. It's not exactly an underdog story, but this sense of this very surprising, endless afterlife. Um, and when I did the Hallelujah book, I didn't set out really to do this as an intention so much, but by the end, I had realized that in some ways my favorite part of reporting that book was talking to just people about how this song figured in their lives and realizing anytime I mentioned it, somebody was like, we played it at my uncle's funeral. My sister played it when her baby was born. It was the first dance at our wedding. You know, everybody had some example in their life of how this song had, you know, figured into their world through whichever version, through whichever moment. And so I think I did go into this book with a little more intention of, hey, I liked that about that book. Let me really try to center that listener experience and you know their ideas and their thoughts and really kind of make that the starting point, focal point for what I want this project to be.
One last question for me before I stop yapping and turn it to the audience. Was your publisher at any point, or your agent, or anybody at any point, really, Alan, you're going to ask kids what they think?
It's uh, happily not really. They got it, and and were very supportive. My editor was very excited about this idea very early on, but there were like structurally there were two big bets, risks that I took with this book that I just didn't know. And that one of them was, do people really want to hear from like 32 kids who they don't know who they are, you know? Do they want to hear what those folks have to say about it? Like, are they going to have thoughts that are interesting enough to, you know, that it's worth giving them that much attention? And do readers really care about that? Or is that just like, I don't know who these people are? That has nothing to do with me. Fortunately, they were also good and thoughtful and smart and had all these ideas that I feel like, and what people are telling me is that they're actually really interested to hear what all these different perspectives are. And then the other is, as you know from reading the book, the center of the book, I went song by song through the album and tried to attach these different stories or moments or themes to each song. About half of those are super easy. The dreams chapter is going to be the story about the TikTok skateboard guy. We know that. I wanted to write about that Glee episode, as it never, you know, a lot of these kids talked about never going back again and the way it's used in that episode. Okay, great. I can do that there. So about half of those, easy. And then another, you know, third of them, okay, I can see like, oh, Daddy, Christine really wrote for Mick Fleetwood and for what he meant to the band, keeping the band together, being this father figure for the group. Okay, that's where I can write about that and about the rhythm section. And, you know, that slots in there. But once you say you're doing it for every one, you have to make every one of you can't say, well, 10 out of the 12 are great. And then the other two, I don't really have anything to say. So was I going to be able to pull off something for each one of these songs, whether it was about the song or about how it appeared in the world, some usage, some placement, or about some other theme on the album? And that part of it got a little nerve-wracking, you know, as you're feeling your way through. And hopefully in the end, I feel like I did, you know, execute against 12 out of 12. But that was a gamble that I kind of had to see how it was going to shake out.
I love it. I mean, I'm constantly reading all of the new books that are released, and that really, it makes it stand out. It makes it unique. And it's just such a strength everyone who hasn't got the book yet is going to go out and do so again as soon as we get off this Zoom. So let me open the floor
Yeah,
to
please.
Q&A. You can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type it in the chat and I would be happy to ask it for you. So unmute or type it in the chat. We'll give everybody a second to find their mute buttons and
Whatever
get
you
to
got,
the...
guys.
I just saw someone unmute. Where'd they go? Look, John, was that you? John Barry? I feel like I'm doing a seance here.
I'm
as I try to,
typing, but
as I
I could
try to
just ask.
navigate the little
Yeah.
boxes.
Okay.
I was typing, but I could just ask.
Yes, go ahead.
Ellen, I am Gen X, and
Yep.
I could listen to Stand Back, If Anyone
Yeah.
Falls from Stevie on repeat for 6 months. Just, it
Yeah.
came out at the right time. The videos, MTV, the whole thing. I'm really dating myself here. I never, ever, ever, ever got Fleetwood Mac. When I think of Fleetwood Mac, you mentioned the Clinton inauguration. I see those awkward,
Yes.
out of time clapping from
Yeah.
our esteemed public officials in their tuxedos. And obviously, there's a disconnect here. I come across this a lot saying, well, 80 million people are correct, and I'm obviously missing something. I love Stevie, and much respect to anyone who wants to be part of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. In your opinion, what am I missing, or where do I go to make sense of this? It's
Well,
really been bothering me for years.
I mean, a couple of things. The cult of Stevie runs deep, runs very thick, and especially with young women now, Stevie is just this massive megastar in ways that I can't even really, I mean, if you're a fan, you would know. Like, I remember maybe a dozen years ago going to see Stevie Nicks at the Beacon, right? And she was great. And it felt like, okay, Stevie, she keeps doing stuff. She can sell out the theater. She's got it. It's fine. 12 years later, she can sell out the Garden and co-headline stadiums with Billy Joel
With
and,
Billy Joel,
doing those dates. What happened it's not like there was some big Stevie hit in those 12 years. So how did her career just go on this skyrocketing, growth in popularity over that time from just people discovering? And I know some of that is Harry Styles is a huge fan and he inducted her into the Hall of Fame, and Taylor Swift is a friend and a fan and champions her, and things that introduced her to a younger audience and helped make her into this icon for another generation. But it's astounding to see this massive, very rapid growth in popularity just based on like vibes and how cool she is. So I can't even fully explain like what happened there that made that so. The Gen X relationship to Fleetwood Mac thing is really interesting. I went back and looked. There's a book like at peak women in rock moment in the 90s, alt rock moment in the 90s, right? The first year of Lilith there. Rolling Stone did a book called Trouble Girls that was a history of women in rock. And I pulled it off my shelf and I was like, let me see how they dealt with Fleetwood Mac. There are 2 paragraphs about Stevie Nicks in the middle of a chapter about like boho rock goddesses. She's in between Kate Bush and somebody. The words Christine McVie do not appear in the book.
Wow.
So in 1990, in the mid 90s, in that big women in rock moment, Fleetwood Mac's kind of nowhere. Like sort of what you're saying. They're in a no man's land. If you did a women in rock book today, Stevie Nicks is your cover. Like there's nobody bigger that you would do. So there has been, a certain amount of up and down. And I think you were representing that exact moment where, there was sort of no place for them. As far as I mean, if you don't hear it, if the other stuff doesn't hit you, it doesn't hit you. Well, I'm not sure what to say.
It's just,
I would say that the underrated power in Fleetwood Mac for me comes from Christine McVie, who has the most writing credits on Rumours. If you look at the Fleetwood Mac greatest hits records, it is half Christine songs and half Stevie plus Lindsey songs. She's the one cranking out all of these hits. and not get, I mean, obviously she gets credit, we love her, but like you think of them so much as the Stevie and Lindsey story that you overlook, I think, the incredible force and songwriting and voice of Christine. So, you know, if it doesn't click for you, it doesn't click for you. This, you know, the Stevie thing is a different, she's working with different producers, it's a different sound, it's a different feel. But you know, for me, it really is this combination and blend and mix of all of these different things that are happening, all of which I love, you know, in equally and in different ways. And I think that's a lot of the magic.
Well, thanks. That helps me with this really dilemma I've been experiencing since I was a kid, and I'm going to go back at it. You've inspired me to go back at it, so thanks.
Yeah, I don't want it to be a chore. I don't want it to be an obligation, but
I'm a journalist as well, so this is what I live for.
Subject for further research. Okay, good.
Thank you,
John.
So here's a question that came to me in the chat. Fleetwood Mac is obviously enjoying this resurgence right now. Are there still more Fleetwood Mac stories to be told, or do we kind of know it all at this point?
That's a fair question. I don't know that there's, I don't know that there's more to talk about this, the making, you know, what the Rumours story and myth is. Now, allegedly, there's finally the big Fleetwood Mac authorized documentary is supposed to come out anytime now. It was announced earlier in the year. Frank Marshall, who's big, he last made that Bee Gees documentary. He directed it. All respect and power to anybody who got all 5 of these camps and estates and teams to sign off and agree to do a project. It's something we've been waiting for decades. So we'll see, you know, if there's some other information or perspective or ideas that come out of that when it comes out. There was the sort of fictionalized retelling of the Rumours story in that play Stereophonic that won the Tony Award last year, won 5 Tonys, was a big, huge success, and is a very lightly, minimally fictionalized rendition of the making of Rumours, though the playwright denies that, but he's not telling the truth. There's currently buzz, which I don't really believe, that they're going to do a 50th anniversary one-off performance in 2027. It's one British tabloid that reported this. I haven't seen any more reliable reporting. It's possible. Anything's possible. They've said that they were never going to do anything after Christine passed, but, you know, to do one special thing, maybe it could happen. And the, you know, certainly the Stevie and Lindsey story. I mean, the Buckingham Nicks album, as you know, was just reissued a month or so ago after being out of print for 53 years with no explanation of why it was out of print for all those years or why now was the time to put it back out. It just had, oh, okay, we're going to do it. It's finally time. Great. Okay. That's a change in the world because it's this, you know, legendary thing that they did before they joined the band that was a flop when it came out, but that nobody ever really, you know, got a chance to hear. So there was a lot of attention around that. Stevie and Lindsey are apparently speaking again after not for a bunch of years. So there's always, you know, a next chapter or a next thing as the story gets told. I don't know that there's anything that's especially new or revelatory that's going to happen. But as we've seen, it is an ongoing, living, breathing phenomenon. And where Rumours or where something from Rumours is next going to appear, next going to materialize, I would not be foolish enough to try to guess.
Well, speaking of guessing, you don't have a crystal ball, I don't think, but you've been working in this realm a very, very long time. Over the course of our discussion tonight, you have mentioned some new artists, right? So Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, these contemporary artists. Are there albums from 2025 that will have such longevity?
It is so, I mean, not to punt the question, but it is such a sucker's bet to play that game, because with this example, if you sat down on December 31st, 1979, with the music establishment and the rock critics and whoever you put together, and you said, okay, the biggest albums of the 70s were Hotel California, Dark Side of the Moon, Born to Run, Zeppelin 4, Rumours. 50 years from now, which of those are kids still going to be listening to? Not one person would have said Rumours. They all would have said those other albums are big, important, statement, art pieces, commentary, like that's real art that's going to live forever. And, Rumours is great, but it's kind of a pop record, isn't it? Like that's not as serious as these other things are. And 50 years later, all of those other things sound old to a 16-year-old. They sound very much of their time and place. And of course, they're all amazing records. They all will live forever, but they are not being listened to anywhere remotely close to how frequently and how intensely Rumours is being listened to. And one of the kids I talked to is like, yeah, it's why we still read Jane Austen. Like these themes are so eternal, so universal. And we do live in a world, I think, now that respects pop music in a different way than it used to, right? That now Taylor Swift and Beyonce and those figures are taken very seriously by sort of the critical world, the music world, in a way that the pop stars in the 70s were not given the same respect that rock bands were. So it's really hard to project out where is the culture going to be and what then is going to, be the thing that resonates. There's still great records that are being made. There's still stuff that I love that's coming out. I am, Melissa, as you may know, a very devoted Swiftie and absolute Taylor believer. I don't know, 50, these things, even my agent keeps reminding me, even in the course of writing a book, when you write a book, as you know, you place a bet that 3 years from now, people are going to care about this. Like it could have burnt out. It could have been replaced by something else. There could have been some crazy scandal or controversy that like blew the whole thing up. And now we're not allowed to listen to Rumours anymore. Like anything can happen. And miraculously, it feels like since I started this thing, Rumours has only gotten bigger every single month. There's only more stuff to point to and bigger and better examples. But, you don't even know in the course of working on something like this, if by the time you're done with it, it's still going to be a thing. That's the gamble that your publishers are taking, right? They're paying you to go and do this thing that like maybe will be bigger, maybe will be smaller. There's no way to know. So I am not going to, even the stuff that I really love, I'm not going to say because it's so good, of course people will still listen to it. We all know there's stuff that's great that we love that everybody else has forgotten about.
Well, we are just about out of time. And I think looking into our crystal ball or not is a good place to end. Last call. Any questions from the audience?
Happy to still take anything if you got it. I'm not in that kind of rush, but
I think we're good. And
okay.
I love keeping it to an hour. So we will break there. Everybody, again, you want to go out and get Don't Stop, Why We Still Love Fleetwood Mac's Rumours, and keep an eye on our website and our social media. We've got a lot of exciting things going on, and we may be luring Alan here to New Jersey in person to do a book signing. That's
did just want to say we're working on dates for Asbury and Monmouth locals. We're working on a date for me to come down and do a signing this month around the travel that I've got. We couldn't get it together in the next couple of weeks, but hopefully before the end of the year, I'll be down there and hopefully can see some of you then and there. Melissa and team will obviously pass along all information as soon as we got it.
Yeah. So again, everybody stay on top of our activities at springsteenarchives.org. And I hope we see you on the 19th for our second session this month with fellow Monmouth University professor Jay Sweet talking about his book on Ray Brown. Okay. So Alan, thank you so much. And thank you everybody.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you guys for sticking it out. Hope to see you soon.
Have a great night, everybody. Good luck with your travel, Alan.
Okay. Thank you. It's exhausting.
Bye.
Bye.